What's going on, my friends? SeanPierceJohnson here, and today we have something very special on the Stompin' Block for another episode of Stompbox Every Day. Another pedal has come to us from Walrus Audio, and it is being launched today, and it is Slö, a dreamy ambient reverb designed to create dreamscapes and soundscapes so immersive that, well, there's only one place that they could become reality, and that is in your dreams. I'm sure somebody out there will criticize my pronunciation of the name because there's an umlaut over the O, and we don't do that here in the United States, and we don't do that in our language, and I don't know whether it's slö, 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 slö. Either way, I'm pretty sure it's slö. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at this pedal. So throw it up on the screen, please, and let's take a look at the controls and talk a little bit about the reverb sounds that you are going to be crafting with this particular pedal. The cool part is that this is very familiar. It's a lot like Fathom, one of my absolute favorite reverb pedals of the moment and has been a favorite of mine pretty much since it came out last year. We have a mix knob right here adjusting our wet-dry blend. We have decay to set the length of our reverb tail. We have a filter, which is a little bit different than, say, the dampening on the Fathom in that it's a little bit more pronounced, so you're kind of rolling off highs as you turn it back counterclockwise. Think of it almost just like a low-pass filter. Set up here, you kind of get your full frequency range, and the more you turn it back, the more highs that you're rolling off, and the more lows are allowed to pass through. We have the X knob, which kind of does the same thing that it has done on previous pedals that Walrus has put out with the ARP 87 and the Fathom, in that it has specific functions depending on the reverb type that you have selected. So we'll dive into those more in detail when we get to the individual reverb types. Lastly, we have a depth control, which lets you add modulation onto the tail of the reverb. In the center here, we have a three-way toggle switch, which as it stands, lets you select between the three different types of reverb available to you on Slö. We have dark, rise, and dream, all very ambient, all very washy, and all very dreamy. But it's the three words on the right, the modulation waveforms, sine, warp, and sync. How do you access those parameters, and how can you choose which one you want to use? This is what comes in handy thanks to the smart switching on these pedals. By pressing and holding down on the bypass foot switch, you can now go ahead and move the switch and select between those three waveforms. Now, that would be all well and good, but the modulation only has a depth. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm just left with this one modulation speed and I just have to live with it. Not so fast, Jack. Press and hold down on the bypass foot switch and turn the depth knob. It's now a rate control. So you can decide whether or not you want to have low speed with a lot of depth or high speed with a medium or low amount of depth. So even though at first glance it seems like you might be stuck with certain options, having those extra accessible functions just by pressing and holding down on the bypass foot switch makes it for a little bit more tweakable, and it gets really fun when it comes to the modulation. And finally, just like the Fathom, one of my favorite things about it was the sustain foot switch. And boom, we got one here on Slö, making sure that your already dreamy reverbs will be decaying out forever. So let's go ahead and start diving into those sounds with Dark. Dark is an amazingly immersive reverb that couples in a low octave pitch shift that you dial in with the X knob. Kind of adds a nice little dimension and a nice little layer underneath your playing that, thanks to the filter knob, you can really fine-tune how apparent it is. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and showcase that right now. This is something that I usually like to leave like 12 o'clock to about 3 o'clock. Just a great reverb for really having something swelling underneath you. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and play a chord, and then we'll sweep the filter knob, and I'll show you how rolling off those highs can really push that low octave in the mix. We'll also go ahead and put the X knob back just a little bit. You can hear it by rolling it back that we start to feel more of a rumbling to the reverb. It's not quite as expansive, and the more we add back into the filter so we get more of a full frequency thing going on, we start to hear it decay out more. But there's other ways that we can get creative with the dark reverb, and one of my favorite things to do is to put the sync modulation onto the tail of the reverb. Now what sync essentially does is, well, the guys at Walrus describe it as putting in a dip of vibrato that kind of feels like you're depressing a Bigsby vibrato bar or whammy bar or wang bar, whatever you want to call it, as long as you don't call it a tremolo. Anyway, I just love the way that it sounds because as a fan of Bigsby's, that nice subtle motion is really cool. But when you up the depth of it, I'll go ahead and do a little bit more. I'll just crank it all the way. You can really hear that dip, and when it comes in, especially with that low octave, it just has this whole cool new dimension to the verb that if it were just a standard hall reverb, you'd kind of be missing it. And of course, by pressing and holding down and turning the depth, we can make it a little faster. So let's go ahead and try that. And I just think that kind of experimentation is very fun. So what about something fairly slow with a good amount of depth? Let's crank that low octave, but maybe this time go for something a little on the brighter side. Now what we'll do is we'll put the decay at 12 o'clock. I'll go ahead and dial the mix back a little bit. This nice little line right here is essentially your 50-50 wet-dry blend. And I'll just go ahead and just leave it right about there. Rise, an auto swell reverb that allows you to set the amount of time it takes for the reverb to rise in with the X knob. Now you can have it be pretty much instantaneous at the low range, or cranking it up. It actually takes quite a bit of time for that reverb to come in. So it almost eliminates the need for a volume pedal, unless you want to do volume swells into the auto swell reverb, which might be kind of interesting, I think. As a matter of fact, why don't we just try it? that was a lot more fun than I thought it was gonna be. Now, when it comes to the modulation side of things, what I like to add on here is just a good old sine wave, something very uniform and very lush. And that's my best descriptor of it that I have right now, I suppose. Going to the bypass switch, all you need to do is go ahead and flick that switch up to the sine wave, and then you can tweak until your heart's content. I personally find that I like higher speeds with medium to low amounts of depth with this particular sine wave modulation. It's just a nice, subtle little motion that just helps add that depth, pardon the expression, to the reverb sound. You know what? For the sake of just creating some chaos, let's throw on some fuzz and see how that sounds. I'm gonna go ahead and darken it for this one. Let's have some fun, shall we? Dream. A pad reverb that allows you to get that infinite hold effect so that you can basically vamp over it and create whatever kind of soundscape that you could possibly want. What's cool with this is we have a couple added features that make this very adventurous. First and foremost, in order to get the infinite hold function going, all you need to do is just tap on the foot switch and you see the bypass LED start to blink. That basically means you have something sampled and it's holding it out infinitely. Now, see where we have the decay knob? Press the sustain foot switch again, and the reverb will decrescendo according to where you have the decay knob set. We have a couple other things to add on here. First and foremost, the X knob is going to control a vibrato that you are putting onto that infinite hold reverb, which is really cool when you play along with it. That motion just... it's a dream. It's really dreamy. Now, personally, the way I like to work the modulation is I like to use the warp, which, according to the guys, is sort of an asymmetric modulation that has some randomness to it. I like having it pretty fast and with a decent amount of the depth engaged. That kind of erratic asymmetrical modulation just coupled with that vibrato makes for a really beautifully messed up sounding modulation. Let's start by going less on the vibrato. Let's go ahead and up the rate, turn up the depth, and then let's make this full bright. we can already hear that reverb, and we can play with that reverb if we want to as well. I love the way that as it decrescendoed, the modulation, the vibrato of it ended at the same time. So it was like as it went down, we got that pitch dip, and that was just really cool. This is one of those things that you could easily do that Eric Johnson trick with the intro to the live Cliffs of Dover thing, sample a chord and then just vamp over it, and then just kind of tailor that modulation to expand it out a little bit and just really flesh things out. That's all of the reverb types that are available to you on Slö. They are dreamy, they are soundscapey, they are absolutely immersive. I think that's the best thing that I can say about it. So to wrap this whole thing up, I'm going to show you guys a couple of my favorite ways to use it in the context of my playing. We'll start with my favorite setting on dark. No, I don't want to play a Stratocaster. Oh. Hi. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that is Slö from Walrus Audio, and man, is this a dreamy reverb or what? It kind of has this weird mellowing effect. It's reverb is one of those things that we get into as guitar players because it helps us put ourselves in a large acoustical space. But this isn't a reverb pedal about creating the sound of a space. This is about creating the sound of an expanse. This is about big, washy reverbs that more give you a feeling rather than a sense of an acoustical space. And quite frankly, it's something that I feel is needed. So with that said, another winner from the cats at Walrus Audio. And I would love to know what you guys thought of Slö. Or is it slow? If you know the correct pronunciation, shoot me a comment below with your thoughts. And when you see it, please do click the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and come back this Saturday for another episode of Stompbox Saturday. Thank you all so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And until next time, my friends, I'm SeanPierceJohnson, and I wish you all great tone and happy stomping. Cheers.